What is more important, grammar or vocab? Or rather, if you are learning a language, what would you be better off focusing on? There's grammar, in a sense the malleable rulebook on how the language is to be composed. And there's also vocab, which can be compared to as the hearty inside of the language, what is to be modified and strung together in sequence by grammatical rules set for it. Of course, you could very well focus on one just as much as the other. But what if this is possibly inefficient for the language at hand? To begin, I am not an expert, or anything akin to this. This is simply a question I thought of while self-studying Chinese, which I have changed my opinion on significantly as I've become more comfortable with the language. I am still working hard to learn Chinese, but I really have learned a lot, and I simply feel this would have been a good thing for me to think about when I first started about a year ago. Through experience, I feel I at least have some modicum of authority over the subject, at least compared to those who have no experience with learning a language whatsoever. Not to sound snobby or anything, I just really recommend learning a foreign language. It allows you to market yourself more to an increasingly more marketable planet. Anyways, back to the topic on hand. Let's start with grammar, as although it is easily more complex than vocab in the sense that it exists on a higher, more abstracted level than it arguably has a smaller scope, in the sense that while both grammar and vocab attempt to encompass innumerable concepts, vocab easily encompasses more generic ideas, and I'd personally prefer to leave the concept that encompasses more for last. Grammar has great importance to languages similar to Spanish, as such languages consist of several tense-based vocabulary changes which are vital to have an understanding of in order to learn the language completely. If you look at languages which use an alphabetical system, such as English and other languages whose origins lie in the Latin tongue, it can be argued that grammar is more important than vocab, since only a comparatively small number of characters are used in conjunction with one another to represent all things, and, as these aforementioned grammar rules can change the very structure of these character sequences by circumstance, grammar can be seen as a vital thing to understand, as it ultimately has the final say in the representation of broader ideas. Along with this, gaining an understanding of new vocabulary is made easier by the use of this alphabetical clause. This can be argued by acknowledging that, when listening to a word you haven't studied yet, you are able to break down the word into its individual components and easily either determine its true meaning through syntactical clues, or easily use a dictionary, as the means to differentiate the word from others is bound in its physical representation. For example, if you hear the word hombre being spoken in Spanish, you can easily find out what it means, as its pronunciation is dependent on its compositional characters. You are able to easily determine how it is spelled as well, simply from its pronunciation, thus necessitating the process of determining its true meaning. Of course, this is only in the case of a language bound by an alphabetical system of writing. For languages whose ideas are represented by individual characters or character sets, such as Chinese, then it can be argued that vocabulary is more important, as while grammar may necessitate the usage of one word here being a character or character set, over another, the basic representation of these ideas themselves remain constant by circumstance. New concepts may be applied in conjunction with these ideas by circumstance, but this generally does not render the sentence as unintelligible as its relative counterpart in a Latin-based language would be if the reader were ignorant to the grammar rule in use. For example, let's compare the sentence, "I cook for my family," in Spanish and in Chinese. As you can see, both sentences are relatively simple in this form. However, let's change it to, "I am cooking for my family. The sentence in Spanish requires the transformation of the verb cocinar, a transformation which perhaps could render the original verb unintelligible to someone learning the language. However, let's say the Chinese sentence only added the character zai, which although a beginner may lack the experience to recognize this character's purpose, the rest of the sentence remains intact, and thus the general meaning of the sentence remains. Along with this, if someone is to hear a character they do not know spoken aloud, the means of determining what was said is bound solely in the circumstance in which it was spoken, and the pronunciation itself, which, depending on the language, is bound to share its pronunciation with other ideas. Thus, it is nearly impossible to determine a character's written form solely by pronunciation, and vice versa. Although there are likely clues to these respective counterparts in what is written or pronounced, as the language is likely to be very old and thus representational in meaning rather than objective, the chances of correctly guessing the equal representation of the character in another form is very low. Thus, with each subsequent guess, there will inevitably be a false equivalency being set as precedent, if not on the first guess. For example, there is a character in Chinese, xin, which for all intents and purposes means new. It consists of this character in this pronunciation/pinyin. However, if you hadn't known of this character before hearing it spoken aloud, then you would only know of the pinyin, and if you were to try to look up the meaning of the pinyin you heard, depending on the circumstances, you could very well believe that you actually heard xin, as in xin, or heart. As you can see, there is not a very reliable way of determining the manner in which a character is written from how it is pronounced, and the same statement can be applied in the opposite manner. Thus, in order to avoid this scenario entirely, it is important to study as much vocab as possible, as opposed to grammar rules, in the case of the study of a language based on characters, and not a relatively limited number of alphabetical letters. As more vocab is learned, the chance of such a scenario occurring declines exponentially. So, although learning grammar is arguably more important in a language whose grammatical rules significantly change the representation of said vocabulary among a limited set of characters, it can also very well be said that, when these circumstances are not present, it is vital to learn vocab in favor of grammar in order to avoid issues present in the duality of the individual representation of ideas. Either way, no matter how much I ramble or how technical things may get, it goes without saying that both vocab and grammar are vital to truly learning a language. For example, sentence structure and basic conjugation are extremely important when starting out, and it is good to review grammar rules, which consist of material you are comfortable with, in conjunction with vocab you are comfortable with. When I first started learning Chinese, I tried to focus far too much on grammar, as I thought that, in the process of learning grammar, I would learn common vocabulary along the way. However, it turned out that the individual study of characters was necessary to truly learn the vocab, and so now I find myself continuing to study and review vocab to this day. So although there may be circumstances where the study of one of these two gargantuan topics may be more beneficial over another, any benefit is likely lost in the effort needed to set about initiating said study methodology. Ultimately, if you are learning a language, the most important thing to do is to just start. Spending time looking for shortcuts will only take time away from learning the language, as the only way you are going to learn it is to memorize and understand the language and its components. And this is only possible by consistently spending time working with it. Get a notebook and writing utensil out. Stop watching videos such as this and start going over some basic vocabulary sets for the language you intend to learn, such as those you can likely find online for free. I don't intend to be harsh, I'm only saying what I wish I could have told myself when I first started. In terms of this video's intention, it is overall more important to focus on both vocab and grammar, although it can be said that non-alphabetical languages seem to lean more towards vocab in terms of importance. I apologize that this only encompasses these two kinds of languages, but these are the only two I have experience with. Thus, I don't feel comfortable making assumptions about languages I have no experience with. Anyways, I wish all of you the best of luck if you intend to learn a new language, and thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great day. Anyways, since you stuck around past my farewell greeting, I just wanted to say that if you enjoy videos such as this, feel free to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thank you again, and goodbye.